again, like I said, the feds offered me a sweetheart deal. When I turned it down, I had my accounts frozen. I had my bank accounts shut. I had my credit cards canceled. I had my wife's business accounts canceled. So I was shown in a very dramatic fashion the power of what happens when you control, when you don't control your own money, when somebody else can flip a switch and shut you out. And that's when Bitcoin became very real to me.
In today's show, I'm going to be sharing with you Bitcoin confessions of a Wall Street insider, taking you behind the scenes in this exclusive interview with the one and only Michael Kimelman. Michael is a pioneer in the cryptocurrency space, so go sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and enjoy today's show. Here at Crypto News Alerts, I drop a brand new episode every day. So be sure to smash that subscribe button and click the bell icon to receive notifications of the latest premium crypto news. And I want to say thank you for helping us reach 3,000 subscribers. I'm looking forward to taking this channel to 100,000 subscribers in 2020. And with your help, we'll accomplish it. Today's show is brought to you by our sponsor, CMDX, the fastest growing health rewards cryptocurrency in the world. To help celebrate the launch of our podcast, they're giving away $25 worth of CMDX tokens absolutely free. For full details, click that link right below the video in the description.
Hey, what's good, everyone? Justin Varengia here with another episode of Crypto News Alerts. Today, I have a very special guest, a pioneer in this space, Michael Kimelman. He has the #1 best-selling book on Amazon called Confessions of an, Wall Street Insider, right? And you have a very fascinating story and also your involvement with crypto in the early stages. So how's it going, man? How you been?
It's going great. Thank you. It's, great industry, great time to be here.
And I see behind you, it says execution. Stop talking about it. And I don't see the rest, but I like it.
It says do the work, which again, there's a lot of people who are good talkers, and then there are some people who take that next step and actually do the work and execute and operate. So
exactly. How'd you first get involved in crypto? How was it introduced to you? Can you take us back?
Absolutely. My crypto story is pretty personal, and I think that's why I have such a passion for this space. So for those who are familiar with my background, some of this might be repetitive, but I was a hedge fund manager. I was originally a lawyer who worked for one of the top firms in New York, got tired of sleeping under my desk, working for other people, was always fascinated by the stock market, had actually traded my way through law school, made some good money there, and then wanted to, transition away from law. It was like late 90s when there were a lot of people making a lot more money and doing a lot more interesting things in tech and finance. So I switched over to trading, worked for several different hedge funds, eventually started my own fund. And then in 2009, that all blew up pretty spectacularly in one day when the FBI, for lack of a better term, a SWAT team showed up and arrested me and took me away and charged me with one count of insider trading. At the time, I was running about a $250 million fund, and my partner had worked for Raj Rajaratnam, who was a big tech fund manager for Galleon Group. They had done a few things wrong. The feds claimed that I was aware of that. I said I wasn't. It turned into a very long and drawn out, very public battle. They ended up offering me a very sweetheart deal, saying plead guilty to this one count of conspiracy, not actual insider trading, but conspiracy, and we'll basically give you no jail time, no fine. And I was pretty stubborn back then, still am, didn't think I did anything wrong, decided to go to trial, not realizing that nobody actually wins at trial. And I was a lawyer and didn't understand this, but now understand the criminal justice system much better. But my introduction to Bitcoin had been as a hedge fund manager a couple of years earlier, and I just thought there's no way the feds are going to allow this to happen. You can't have, especially when you're the primary reserve currency of the world, you can't have a competing currency that is untrackable. I just didn't think our government would permit it based on everything I know about who they are, where we come from, political systems, monetary systems. Money is used to control the populace, and if you can't track that money and you don't own that money, it becomes a lot harder for a government to affect its will, any government, whether it's the US or elsewhere. So I just thought they'd shut it down, and it looked like in the Silk Road stuff that they were starting to take steps to do that. So I tucked it away and compartmentalized it. It became very personal to me while I was on pretrial. And again, this is before I had had a chance to defend myself. One of the cornerstones of the American system is innocent until proven guilty. Everybody's has their own due process. You know, you're supposed to have the ability to, in a court of law, defend yourself. Before any of this happened, again, like I said, the feds offered me a sweetheart deal. When I turned it down, I had my accounts frozen. I had my bank accounts shut. I had my credit cards canceled. I had my wife's business accounts canceled. So I was shown in a very dramatic fashion the power of what happens when you control, when you don't control your own money, when somebody else can flip a switch and shut you out. And that's when Bitcoin became very real to me and what it stood for. And obviously, down the line, I committed myself to learning much more about it, studying much more about it, and then had the very good fortune to meet my current partner, Charlie Shrem, during the Silk Road mess when Charlie himself had gotten charged with something that I thought was, for lack of a better term, ridiculous, but understandable. And he came to me for advice because I had already been through the system. I ended up serving as part of my entire situation. I served 21 months in prison, went to trial, fought the charges, lost at trial, despite many people thinking it was a ridiculous case, ridiculous trial. That's the punishment when you take that risk and lose. So as I was coming out of prison, Charlie was going into prison, and we became good friends. And I gave him some advice. We stayed friendly while he was away. So again, one of the smartest, best people I know, then became a good friend and kept my education going, so to speak.
Crazy story, man. So it just goes to show us how dependent we are upon the system, because you decided you didn't want to go that route. They turn everything off. All of a sudden, you have no access to any money, any financing, because we're so dependent upon that system, which has been in place for us. I guess we can coin it the matrix, for lack of a better term. So this is going back, is this like 2009 or 2010?
This is 2009 was the case. The trial was around 2011. I met Charlie in 2014. And that's when I got serious about Bitcoin. But you're entirely right. And that's, I'm sure, a conversation you have with a lot of people about, hey, you don't really own your money. You don't have control of your life in many ways. And most people, especially in America or the United States, just dismiss that because we do have a stable currency. People globally understand it a lot better, whether it's a Venezuela or an Argentina or China where there are capital controls. But here, everybody's like, it's my money, I'm fine. And we do trade convenience for quite a few things here. But again, somebody could flip a switch. And we've seen lately, I know people, whether it was PayPal or Intuit, Andreas Antonopoulos just got kicked off of Intuit. They said, we're not going to process your credit card transactions anymore.
That's wild.
Because you're involved with cryptocurrency. And I've had similar things like that. I've had multiple accounts closed. And I know many other people in the space have as well, where people have just deemed it, even though it's completely legal. And there are U.S. Treasury rulings and IRS rulings allowing Bitcoin transactions and whatnot. Depending on your bank and depending on everything else, they can more or less, for lack of a better term, deplatform you. And I was one of those original people who were deplatformed. And now we see a lot more people, whether it's a Facebook, a Twitter, or elsewhere, if they're, wrong political party, wrong philosophy, or active in cryptocurrency, they can easily be knocked out. And that's a big deal.
And that's what makes Bitcoin so valuable, even as an affiliate, as an online marketer, entrepreneur. Dealing with merchants, it's a nightmare. Dealing with banks, it's such a headache. I hate it. I hate how they make it so difficult for you to even withdraw your funds, but they don't second guess you depositing as much as you like. You just got to let them know where it's from, right? For all the laws they have.
Yes and no. I've gotten a couple notices lately from different banks saying, you've exceeded your deposit amount. So there's even some control on the depositing, for sure on withdrawals. Withdrawals are wires. I mean, if you ever try to wire money to some place like China or Singapore or somewhere else, I mean, you get interrogated at this point. Where is this
It's
money
insane.
going to? Why? And then it's a 2 to 3 day process, which is ridiculous, of course, and somebody's just pushing a button. So, yeah.
And that's what makes Bitcoin so attractive. I love using it to send and receive funds. I don't have to deal with banks. I don't got to worry about if it's a weekend, if it's after hours. There's no permission. It's borderless. We can travel with it. It's the perfect scenario. It's like it was designed for us entrepreneurs in this digital age
Yes.
that we're in.
Perfect.
Digital gold, right?
Yeah, it's the perfect currency for the digital economy and for a sovereign individual that wants control of his money and his life without, getting permission from somebody else to be able to spend, deposit, trade. It's, if you're a libertarian, especially, it's hard to measure that freedom and the power that it has.
That's what I look at it as. It's our ticket to freedom. Now, you referred to yourself as a disruptpreneur. My first time hearing that term. I call myself a cryptopreneur, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what a disruptpreneur is.
I just think in general, and Bitcoin's the perfect example of it, there are certain exponential technologies that exist right now that are really disrupting traditional space. So, like I said, Bitcoin on the finance side is a perfect example in that it will shake the foundations, not just of monetary policy and transactional interaction, but, freedom. If you can use that Bitcoin blockchain to perfect voting and to make sure that there's no fraud in voting, or in, ensuring that internet access is not cut off through mesh networks and other different angles. So disruptopreneur just means you look for disruptive technologies, and those are the roadmap for where you want to allocate your capital and investment time. So, cannabis was another one for me. Back in 2015, I started making investments and looking at different cannabis companies because I knew it was going to be a profound, impact. This is something that's been around for thousands of years. It shows clinical efficacy. And it's cheap. You can grow it. It's everything pharma would hate. If it's not done in a lab for 20 years and tweaked and password and patent protected, where they can forget about curing you, but keep you slightly sick, but just not sick enough that you'll die. That's our pharma model right now. And cannabis has the potential, and not just cannabis, but other plant-based medicines, including diet, which we've seen, think about the original food pyramid. It was basically inverted to please the dairy industry. It used to be, very protein and meat and plant-based. And, they said, well, what about milk and bread and all these other things that you should eat? Everything, that should be the most amount that you'll consume. And of course it was wrong. So disruptopreneur just means you look for those disruptive technologies. And like I told some of my clients and coaching clients back in 2014, 2015, crypto, cannabis, VR, AR, those are the types of things that obviously will disrupt in a tremendous manner all of these traditional institutions. And you want to try to place yourself in proximity to those types of disruptions and see where there's opportunities.
100%. I agree. I mean, why not place yourself in the forefront? I mean, we're on the cusp of, I believe, the biggest revolution of human history, which is the financial revolution, because we've been enslaved for so many years at the hands of these bankers, which no longer have control. I bet they try to do everything in their power to stop Bitcoin, but they probably realize there's nothing that they can do to stop it due to its decentralized nature. Which crypto projects do you feel are the biggest disruptive technologies you're aware of? Are you really bullish on any particular crypto projects you got your eyes on right now?
So I wouldn't quite say I'm a maximalist, but I am approaching maximalism. I spent a lot of time, especially at Crypto IQ, the advisory and publication that I started with Charlie, analyzing different projects. And in 2017, whether or not a project maybe had the ability to flesh out its vision or whatnot, there were some good investment opportunities and trading opportunities. I think we've seen that enormous shakeout in 2018. That's continued in 2019. My basic approach mid to late 2018 was that Bitcoin was the only place you could really, if I was going away for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years and had to keep my money somewhere, the only project I was comfortable keeping it with was Bitcoin, because it was obviously the most secure network, most of the resources there, the most heavily tested. It doesn't mean there aren't other projects out there that are interesting. And as somebody who's, friendly with a lot of founders, whether it's, Monero and some of these other projects, I think they serve a certain use and utility in this ecosystem, but I haven't seen anything yet that I'm super confident is going to completely disrupt and be safe. And part of it is, I like watching Ethereum and EOS and some of these other things. I like that people are building on them, but you still have that consensus mechanism that may or may not work. So I don't want to put, 7 figures, 6 figures, my life savings into a platform where there's a chance that, I'm not saying it'll happen, but it did happen from Ethereum Classic to Ethereum, or somebody like Vitalik or on EOS, some of the people who have an inordinate amount of influence can take the project in a direction where I won't really have a say. Bitcoin, I know everything that happens. It's right there on the blockchain. I know exactly the mechanism for how it works. I know how blocks get added. It's been proven. And it's, again, the most secure network in the world by a factor of, probably 100. So Bitcoin is where I'm really interested to see. And most of the improvisation and creation I want to see is obviously on that second layer, whether it's Lightning or other projects or confidential transactions, those types of build outs. But that doesn't mean there won't be some other projects that are really interesting, either from a stablecoin approach or, there's been some other ones like Algorand and whatever, where I think the technology is really interesting, but it's also very untested. So I'm happy to watch, and I hope we do get a lot more coins that work. But I do think there was a lot of garbage in the preceding 2 to 3 years, or, for lack of a better term, exit scams, or people who, had a real vision of how it worked, and it became a way to raise money outside of the traditional system, which I do support. I think one of the saddest things we have going on right now is that my country, the United States, used to be the greatest engine of innovation in the world, Silicon Valley. Anything you've seen from a tech perspective that's been real or had an impact came from Silicon Valley, and that's where all the growth in the US has come from for the last 30 years. We've taken a very different approach with crypto, which I think is devastating from a long-term perspective for our competitiveness as a country, which is that we've said, hey, this, we don't know what this is, possibly because of the entrenched interest, but we're going to treat it like a security, which it's not. In many ways, some things were used and money was raised in a security type fashion, but it's really a different asset class altogether. And rather than adapting and getting our smartest and brightest together and saying, hey, let's at least carve out something here, whether it's an exemption, a Reg A plus, but that's a sort of quick pass that you can raise money using. If you have to spend $500,000 or $1 million to test an idea out, to test a project out because of legal costs, accounting, registration, all that, you're destroying 95% of the great ideas out there. I mean, think about how many different projects came out of this, and people can criticize and say, oh, but it was a lot of garbage. Well, it was a lot of garbage in the tech boom as well. I mean, I can give you 100 different companies I traded that went bankrupt, but out of that, again, grew some very impactful, incredible companies like a Facebook or an Amazon and others. So you need that when you have an exponential technology. Nobody knows how it's going to play out. So throw a lot of capital at it, but make it in a way where you get rid of fraud. Nobody's saying, oh, there should be fraud, but there's got to be an easier way to raise money, whether, we tried a little bit with the Jobs Act and a couple of these other crowdfunding sources, but if you can't give, 2 brilliant kids in a Stanford dorm room the ability to test an idea and raise a little bit of money without them going through full legal channels, you know what? They'll go to where they can do that. And there are other countries like Singapore and Switzerland and Estonia and others that are rolling out the red carpet for this innovative technology. So we're going to lose that. That's regulatory arbitrage. And if you lose that, you lose a lot of really smart people and you lose a lot of capital. So I think that long term, that's a very bad approach we've taken.
Yeah, great point. Now, Tim Draper just recently came out, and of course, he's been making predictions for a while, and he's been pretty accurate. But he says by 2022 or the latest 2023 first quarter, he believes the Bitcoin price will be 250,000, but not because of scarcity. He believes it will take 5% of the currency market share, which I don't know, the currency market cap is massive, like something like 67 trillion or something like this. What are your thoughts as far as a Bitcoin price prediction looking into the future?
So this is obviously a very difficult question. And as somebody who used to run, hundreds of millions of dollars, whenever you're trying to handicap something, especially something this unknown, it always is very difficult. I felt when Bitcoin was in the 3,000 to 5,000 level earlier in the year that it was, and last year, actually, December of 18, when I was, dragging my dad into it and telling him he had to buy some of it, and along with some other friends, that from a risk reward point of view, it was probably the greatest single setup I've ever seen. And even if it, never fulfilled its potential, I knew that was an artificially low price that would eventually go up. So I'm a big believer in scarcity, and I don't think we've ever seen true scarcity in a financial asset. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So when I used to trade, especially during the tech boom, you had these IPOs because they would release a very small amount of outstanding stock that you could own. And of course, the prices went haywire. They went super up. But again, all you have to do when a price goes up like that, when you're talking about equities and traditional companies, is you do a secondary offering. So you can always bring more stock to the market. And if you're in a company, the natural incentive when your stock price triples, quadruples, 10x's is to keep bringing to the market, because then you could use that capital later to acquire companies or do whatever you want. But it makes sense to issue more liquidity, more stock. Bitcoin doesn't have that ability. It's literally the first financial asset where they're not making any more of it. And that's why, most people understand that just from a purely numerical point of view, this has the potential to go absolutely haywire. If you think about 21 million outstanding, 4 to 5 million probably lost, it doesn't take very many people to make a small purchase. Like, there's more millionaires in the world than there are Bitcoin. So if this ever fulfills its potential, and that's a real question now, but if it ever fulfills its potential, who knows what the price could be? I mean, 250,000 is obviously easy and probably 7 or 8 figures, but there's a lot that I think has to happen before that. I mean, I was somebody who thought we would get a massive push fairly soon, within the next year or two. I don't know. I think there's still a lack of utility, mostly born out of a very difficult user interface. I think your average person would throw his hands up when they have to deal with the 2FA and the wallets that are, as long as they are and everything else. And if you lose it, you've lost it. Like, we do need to have a little bit more take place on the user, interface to make it more, have more utility, as well as Lightning Network and some tax and political, more or less, public policy. Right now, theoretically, you get taxed anytime you use it. So why am I going to use it if I'm going to pay taxes on coins I brought, at $200 to buy a cup of coffee or to buy something else? And maybe it's not meant to buy a cup of coffee, but Lightning Network has the potential to solve some of that. But everything feels slow because we're in a Twitter world where, everything's instant. 140, 280 characters. If it doesn't happen overnight, people throw up their hands in frustration. And we've been hearing for 2 or 3 years about how Bitcoin's going to take over the world, and it still hasn't. Well, if you look in, obviously, the scheme of things, whether it was digital music or cell phones or anything else, these things eventually pick up. But, there's an infrastructure build out that needs to take place. I mean, you're basically turning the financial system on its head. So it's going to take some time. I'm a little more patient, but I do think everything our government does with their printing and spending, everything all these other governments do with the race to the bottom from a currency perspective, will increase the speed of adoption. But, I'd like to see it actually, you don't want to see it go ballistic yet, because I don't think we're ready for it to go ballistic. I think in 2017, when that happened, like you saw, a lot of people lost money. You got a lot of dumb money that came into the sector. The build out wasn't ready to handle that type of activity. You would have crashing of exchanges, wallets would have problems, people would get hacked. Again, what I'm comforted by is that a lot of people are building right now, and they're building great stuff on the network. They're adding things to it, and they're continuing to stay in this sector. So especially, it's the only thing I know where you can get some of the best minds from Microsoft or Google or Silicon Valley or anywhere else, Singapore, Hong Kong, building, and they're building for free. So it's like almost you own these people. They work for you. If you're an owner of Bitcoin, your employees are some of the brightest people in the world building out the value of that network. So I'm encouraged, but I don't know if it's going to be as quick as we think. I do think, nothing would shock me, and you have to position yourself for this could be 100,000 next year, or it could be 3,500, 4,000. So if you position yourself appropriately, I'm a trader at heart, so I need to trade a little bit, but I still think if you're a pure trader, you run the risk of not being around like a lot of people were when we went from $1 to $20,000. Nobody can, if you're a trader, there's going to be some huge spikes that you're just never going to get a chance to buy back in. So you want to have a core holding that's 50. For me, it's about 80%. And then 20% you can play with it, whether it's Bitcoin or other coins, trade them, try to increase your supply. But that's a personal decision. Obviously you have to see what you're suitable from a risk perspective, what your short-term capital needs are, and everything else. But I do think the sky's the limit, just from a purely numbers point of view. Again, if it becomes a real alternative to the reserve currency and becomes a global reserve currency, I mean, then it's worth $100 million or something ridiculous. But let's figure out, without planning for that hyper Bitcoinization, let's see what it can do in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think a lot of that's going to be dependent on the value of the network and the improvements people continue to make. But as long as it's secure, safe, and you own it, and it's, like I said, censorship resistant, it's going to have value. Even if the United States walks away from it and says, we don't want you to own it, we won't let you own it, you shouldn't own it, there's enough people worldwide that need to own it, that want to own it, that from a pure game theory perspective, we'll just get left behind. And other countries will take the lead here, just as China and some of these other people have indicated a little bit more of a friendly approach.
Exactly. I think that's what makes this so exciting, as well as the uncertainty. We don't know if Bitcoin will be 100,000 next year, or be $1 million, as the crazy McAfee predicts, or if it'll be $3,000 and we're all scratching our heads like, how is this possible? But that's
Sure.
what makes this game, so exciting at the end of the day. So with Lightning Network, do you see Bitcoin as being scalable if they had better utility? Or where are we at in that current process if we wanted to get Bitcoin in more hands and more transactions being used?
It's still being fleshed out. For lack of a better term, it's still in the beta phase. But what's encouraging is the growth is continuing. And away from Lightning Network, what we're seeing, which I think is going to help with adoption too, is a lot of these little apps that, whether it's Earn or Lolli. I don't know if you've used Lolli or seen Lolli, but it's basically a plug-in where instead of getting cash back for buying something from Banana Republic, they give you cash back in Bitcoin. So it's a way for people who do what they do anyway, shopping, to earn Bitcoin. And I like to give people Bitcoin gift cards and stuff like that. Once somebody has it, I'm going to try to get my kids a coin mine for Christmas and Hanukkah, because I think that's a better way to teach them about it. If you give them, if I just sent them a little bit, maybe they'd learn about it. But if you give them an instrument to teach them, and you see them, whether it's the mining aspect, whether it's the just education aspect of it, I think that's a great way to pull people into the system. But again, the real arbiter of all of this, just, as a financial guy and as a trader, and what we saw in 2017 is price. Price is going to drive adoption. If Bitcoin stays at 4,000 for 18 months, you're not going to see huge adoption. You may even see it just tailor off as some people come in, some people go away. But if it ticks up, you're going to see, again, a massive adoption. And right now it has a big mind share for an instrument that's fairly new. It's about a decade old. I mean, if you think about gold or any of these other types of monetary, assets, nothing happened in 10 years. 10 years is an inordinately quick time for Bitcoin to have achieved what it's achieved. And if you think about it, it's really only been since 2016 that it started to get any type of mass adoption or commercial adoption, and people came into the sector. Before that, it was fun, it was fascinating, it was a technological marvel, but it was limited to the, the crypto community and the tech community, and some, illicit uses, which is fine. You always have, porn and other things driving adoption just because that's where people are. But,
that's where everyone is. Yeah.
Right. In the last 3 years, if you look at what it's accomplished and the mind share it has, it is poised for a big time adoption. Because, there's no growth really anywhere else. And we can mask that with the numbers, but there's no growth anywhere else. And the current system is terrible. for lack of a better term.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you coming out here and sharing with our audience. Where do you recommend people go to find out more about you? Is it Twitter? I'm going to put all your links below this video, of course,
Perfect.
in the description, but which communities do you prefer?
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all good. Twitter, I've been shadow banned, so I may actually start a new account there. But when my book came out, it was good for a while. Then I think I must have made some comments somewhere because they shut me down, and now it's the interaction is very low. So I might add an account there, but I'm active in Instagram and Facebook as well. And Crypto IQ. I encourage people to come out, check us out at Crypto IQ. We do a newsletter. More importantly, if you're an active trader or investor, we do a trade room, which I think is the best in the business, where Charlie, myself, and a couple of other top tier traders are in there. We're giving advice, we're making trades, education, everything else. And if I could do just one quick plug, we do have a new product as well coming out that we call it Tradecraft. So the problem with a lot of these trade rooms or newsletters that people read about is if you get a signal, whether it's in Telegram or elsewhere or a text message, look, if you're 25 and you're in front of a computer all day, God bless you. You can enter trades, you can do stop losses, you can watch charts. And I did that for 15 years, but I'm not doing it anymore. I've got 3 kids, I've got a lot of other outside businesses and interests. So if I wanted to follow along, imagine you're in a movie and you get a trade signal. What are you going to do? Pop out of the movie, log on, do 2FA, put in the trade, go back in, and then you get another signal and you got to come back out. So we've developed a proprietary technology that allows you to plug your account into our account. It's an informational linked product. And then you basically can shadow trade or echo trade what we do. And it's obviously you control your account still. You can control the leverage, the coins, and everything else. But if we make a trade, you have the option to then mimic that trade. And it'll instantly do the stop loss and everything else that we do. So it's a really powerful product that allows us old guys, anybody over the age of 30, to follow along and to reap the type of returns we have. And the alpha in crypto obviously blows away anything I've ever seen in any other asset class. So it's a really fascinating product.
Sounds great. I appreciate you sharing it. I'll definitely include that link, so everyone be sure to check that out. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you later. Peace.
Great, Justin. Thank you.
Well, that's going to conclude today's show. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and journeying along with me inside this Bitcoin rocket ship heading straight to the moon. If you haven't done so already, be sure to smash that subscribe button and click the bell icon to receive notifications of the latest premium crypto news.